Democrat, a fairly conservative to moderate Democrat, and so it's in keeping with the district. However, this district also, interestingly, and I think it was when they redrew this time around, they tried to save Guy Villela by taking a very highly Republican voting town and moving it into his district. And they ended up then moving it out of another member's district, Nick Spano, who is no longer with us because he was ousted by a Democrat. So they ended up losing two seats.
They overdid it. In a razor-thin election, actually, as you recall,
well, the first
Spano
one, 18
lost.
votes.
Right. Spano ended up losing to the current Senator Stuart Cousins. So, yeah, they overdid it. The balloon stretched too tightly. I don't think they could have anticipated that Villela would go to jail, though. But that's what happened. Villela goes to jail.
He was indicted at the time that he was at very least under investigation.
Yeah, he was under investigation. He played fast and loose, and he had just had a very tight race in 2000 against former Attorney General Capel's wife for that state Senate seat. So they were in the process of bolstering his reelection prospects. They cut her out of the district, and then they added Republican voters, but they overdid it, and now both seats are Democratic.
So what else do you have for us today?
Well, those are sort of the more, hilarious and yet troubling maps. There's also two other quick maps, really, to look at, which is proponents of the status quo argue, well, it's really not their fault that the districts look this crazy. It's the Voting Rights Act, it's the state constitution.
We've heard that from some of the elected officials who've been on the show this week.
The next two maps are going to show how each house did their lines districtly by gerrymandering and rigging the number of people in the districts. Under New York law, and U.S. Supreme Court has said this okay, you can have a 10% variance in the number of people in a district. And so what we're looking at now are assembly districts. And the darker the blue the district, the more people in them. So when the Democrats, who are based in New York City, drew these maps, they drew, and as you can see on the bottom there in New York City is a very light blue. The fewest people in a district are in New York City. The districts that have the largest population are upstate. New York City, being New York, is very Democratic. If you have fewer people in a district, you can have more districts. And so that way, the Democrats were able to increase the number of New York City-based districts at the expense of the rest of the state to help them with their partisan advantage.
But when it comes to constituent services, the larger your district, the harder it is to meet the needs of all these people. I mean, you have to drive from one end of your district to another, particularly if you are representing, say, the Abraham Lincoln on a vacuum cleaner district. Right. It's not easy, necessarily.
Well, but there's some things you can do about that, and there's some things you can't. I mean, upstate is big area, big geographic area, but there's not that many people in parts of it. So you're going to have big districts. In this case, what they were really focused on was not so much the driving patterns of upstate assembly Republicans, was can they maximize the number of Democratic seats in New York City. So let's go to the second map.
Okay.
The second map shows the state Senate seats, and that was drawn by Republicans, hence I did red. In that sense, the darker the red, the more people in them. So the Republicans here have, New York City again has the darkest red. They have districts with the most people in them, 30,000 more people in New York City Senate districts than upstate. Why? Because they want to have as few Democratic seats in New York City as possible, and they want to maximize the number of upstate Republican seats. Same state, same people, same enrollment patterns, two totally different approaches to drawing the lines. Why? Because they're trying to maximize their political advantages with the redistricting system. These are really good examples that undermine the argument that somehow, it's just some other external force in the universe that drives the redistricting decisions. It's quite clear from those two maps that politics drives it.
Okay, so two questions then, now that we've had our little lesson here. Two questions. One, can politics be taken out of the redistricting process at all? I mean, government is inherently political. We elect people to go to government. That's a political process. And then once you get in government, you're supposed to, what is the Mario Cuomo line? You're supposed to campaign in poetry and govern in prose.
Right.
But the reality is that politics is always like sort of a miasma hanging over, like a cloud over the Capitol. You just can't get rid of it. So this whole independent redistricting commission push that we're making now, is it possible that it would actually work?
Well, I think the short answer is yes. I mean, other states do it. It's not like this has been something that only you can find in France. The state of Iowa, for example, has has a system that the Gianaris bill, which I know you've talked about, is modeled on. And they've had it in place now for 30 years. And they have very competitive races. They have districts that more or less look like geometric shapes that we could recognize. And they do it where they basically empower technocrats to draw the lines that the legislature ultimately approves. Now, and there's other states have other systems. 17 states have either bipartisan or more independent systems than New York. New York, though, what New York does is typical. It's not, again, I'm not arguing that New York is uniquely bad or anything like that. It's just bad, and a lot of the rest of the country does it that way. So you could have a system where you could make it less political, less partisan, less, I would argue, almost petty, another P word, because in some cases, legislators are fighting over whether some well-known celebrity lives in their district.
Oh, and there's actually a fight to, I think Bill Parment was telling me, there's a fight to, they had to carve up Central Park. Instead of just putting it in someone's district, no one lives there. But everyone wants the prestige of
members,
well, right, and the prestige of people
right.
being able to say, I represent the park, and having some ownership of it. They want to represent the Met, they want to represent the park, they want to represent the I don't know, Museum of Modern Art, whatever it is. And so they fight over that sort of thing, even though there's no voter there to serve, to have voting for you.
That's right, and celebrities too. I mean, so it can be petty, it can be about politics and be about power, but you can do it. Other states do it. We think New York should.
And so, just very quickly in closing, what would the legislature look like if, in fact, it was independent?
Well, you would have a lot of different people here because it may not matter that much. I mean, New York is more Democratic than it is Republican, and so that may still be reflected in the seats. But you may not have the same people here because in a rational system, you may end up with 2 or 3 incumbents in the same district. And so we just think it's a pure conflict of interest for legislators to draw their own lines, in effect choosing their own voters. That's not right, and that should end.
Well, I want to thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Blair Horner from NYPIRG. It's always good to talk to you.
And Abraham, thanks.